Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 136 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I have a very interesting guest, Joel Borgquist, the President and CEO of Etik. Etik is a company that helps corporations engage in not only ethical behavior, but fulfill in a transparent manner social, corporate, and responsibility. I hope you will find it interesting. It certainly applies to the compliance space. The episode comes in at just over 22 minutes.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today, I am very intrigued to have with me Joel Borgquist. Joel is the president of, I know I'm going to butcher this, Etik?
Etik.
Did I get that right? Etik. Okay, sorry.
Etik. Mm-hmm.
Joel and I met via social media a little while back and took a look at his website and visited with him about some of the things he's doing with his new company. I was very interested in it. I asked him if he would, if I could have a little bit of his time to come on interview him for the podcast, and he graciously took time out of his day to visit with me. So, Joel, with that, welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Yes, and thank you, Tom. I'm excited.
Well, good. Joel, I'd actually like to start off by asking you about the two university degrees you have, because I've never heard of them before. I've certainly heard of your school, but if maybe you could tell us a little bit about your undergrad and graduate experience, and then kind of go right into your new company and what you guys are trying to do. But listed on LinkedIn, you went to George Mason University, where you have both a bachelor and a master's in conflict analysis and resolution. So what were those? What did you study?
Yes, absolutely, and it's very relevant because what I studied has everything to do with what I'm doing today with Etik. And so, I studied conflict analysis and resolution, which is exactly as it sounds. It's conflict analysis and resolution. So it's analyzing the conflicts that we have in our world, either conflicts between individuals or community conflicts, or even national or international conflicts. And so it's a very broad discipline. In many ways, it's very interdisciplinary. It's examining all of the factors that cause conflicts and things that influence those conflicts. And where I spent a lot of my focus was particularly on global community conflicts, a lot of things related towards globalization or religious conflicts or ethnic conflicts. That was a big focus of mine. There are many in the field that specialize elsewhere, but that was more of what my focus is in. And so I got my undergraduate degree from George Mason University. I very much enjoyed the topics, the opportunities, and being able to work hands-on in the field and really be involved in that field and in looking at conflicts and looking at how these things can be resolved and looking at bringing people together, which is a big passion of mine. And that's where Etiks, which what we're going to be talking about more as far as my company Etik, it's where, ethics and how we relate to each other really come together. And then in my graduate studies, which I'm currently in as far as the graduate studies, is a continuation of what I studied in undergraduate, and something I think I may even continue into a doctoral study, because I'm very, very interested in the field academically. Now, I'm the son of a professor, so I definitely appreciate and applaud you for that. But what I'm kind of intrigued by is, as you know, I focus on FCPA compliance, and many people look at that as, okay, you just put the building blocks in place and maybe you try to influence some decisions, and that's really your role inside of a corporation. Obviously, your remit is much broader than that, but how does what you do sort of tie into how a company would do business? Absolutely. So when it comes into what I've studied, and then where my passion comes into founding Etik and what Etik does, and when you're looking at the ethical issues and when you're looking at the conflicts that are occurring, and where kind of my academic background and what I do today really come together, is it's looking at trying to address many of the problems that we found through globalization there are many positives about globalization, many good things that have come from it. And unfortunately, with everything, you find there are positives and you find there are problem areas as well, and there are issues that need to be addressed. And so where my background and what we're trying to accomplish with Etik really come together is trying to address those issues that I work with both nonprofits and for-profits, just to give you some background there. The issues that these organizations who are working globally, that's specifically where we're looking at with Etik, is global organizations, all of the different issues that they're trying to deal with and confront that have to do with globalization, with working in other cultures and working in many very complicated situations while trying to maintain that trust with their stakeholders back in their home base nation. If that's the United States, with those in the United States who don't necessarily know what this organization is doing. They're donating to an organization who's, let's just say, for example, digging wells in Africa. They're not seeing those wells themselves or the different interactions with the community because they're back in the United States, but they're trusting those things are happening. And same with a for-profit organization that has their production overseas or has many different things they may do overseas. Those in the United States are trusting that those things are well, but they don't necessarily have that confirmation. So what we do is we work with those organizations who are working globally. We review their practices. We look at what they're doing and how they're doing it. We provide recommendations on those things, and then we want to report that back to the stakeholders and to create that trust. And so we're looking at improving those organizations, but then also providing transparency through our liminal report, and then a certification that certifies that liminal report. And then from there, it's not as though you can have just a kind of a fast food restaurant approach towards ethics, where you show up and you say, well, these are my problems, and you just say, well, here's the solution, just go out there and fix it. It doesn't often work that way. It can be very complex. It can take a lot of time. It can take a lot of different efforts in order to make things happen. So then we also work with organizations to support them and to help them continue to grow and to be healthy and to address whatever issues may arise. And obviously, depending on the industry, depending on whether nonprofit or for-profit, there are some differences, but our specialty is really working with organizations globally in their ethics and their transparency. And that's where you're going to see consistency throughout everyone that we work with. And we're also looking to work with organizations who maybe aren't global today, but want to go global and want to do that ethically and want to do that well and have an impact, again, whether they're a for-profit company or it's a nonprofit organization.
Joe, let me see if I can break that down, because many of my listeners will be familiar with the structure of what we would call an effective FCPA or anti-corruption compliance program. And you certainly talked about many of the steps in your process that translate over to a compliance program, but it seems like you started with an assessment. Now, in my world, we'd call that a risk assessment, but it seems like you would come in and really assess where a company might be in terms of their ethical standards and ethical needs. Then from there, you would create a proposed remediation plan or implementation plan if they didn't have anything, then communicate, and then train. Did I get that right?
Yes. I would say more or less that's a pretty good explanation. I would say the only thing I would really add to that is that with what we're looking at with ethics is it's very broad. When you're dealing with ethical issues, it's very broad. Compliance in general tends to be more narrow. It's generally addressing ethical issues, but it's addressing them more narrowly and sometimes more in a limited nature, whereas ethics may address a bigger picture, if you will. But we're certainly very interested in compliance, and we're certainly very interested in what organizations do related towards compliance, but we're looking at them in a very holistically. So compliance certainly comes into play, whether or not they are complying with certain standards or regulations or laws, but there's also greater ethical principles that also come into play that we're also looking at. So we look at each organization holistically. We look at what their promises are to their stakeholders, what their responsibilities are. We look at what their practices are, and we look to see, are those lining up? And that's largely what we do, and we work with those organizations to be the best that they can be. And the great thing about transparency is that you'll find, and particularly as you're looking globally at global ethical issues, is you find there's a lot of gray areas as well. There's a lot of discussion and debate about what the exact amount. Just to give you an example, what the exact amount that someone who's working in a facility in a certain country should be paid versus the amount they're paid in another country. Should those amounts be equal? Is it okay that they differ? What's the lowest amount that's acceptable? What's the highest amount? There's so many questions related to this. And so when you get to certain very difficult gray areas, what we are really looking for, the ethical principle we're really looking for, is we're really looking for honesty, and we're really looking for that trustworthiness. So there's a lot of gray areas where people are going to have differing beliefs, and different stakeholders will have different values related towards those, and that's where the transparency really comes in, because they will know and they'll be able to make an informed ethical decision about their values and seeing their values move forward. So to some it may be a gray issue. For others, they may see it very clearly, but on a lot of these issues, we really like to see transparency, because we really want to engage the stakeholders in the conversation, that they're seeing their values put forward, because a corporation may fit one person's values but may not fit another's. But that transparency opens that up and brings them into the conversation, and it also creates an opportunity to hold them accountable based upon their set of values and principles.
So you used a couple of terms that I'm not sure my listeners would be familiar with. So let me just ask you and see if you can expand on them. The first one was liminal report, and the second was global practice. What do those terms mean in the context of Etik and your business?
Absolutely. So our liminal report, and I apologize with some of the terminology here as I was going through if I didn't clarify something. Our liminal report is our transparency report. So that's everything to do with, once we've reviewed these organizations, that is our transparency report. Liminal is and we use this word a lot, not realizing it. It's the same base word for the word preliminal, which means before that liminal point. So liminal has everything to do with transition. It's a transitionary area. It's a space where you're in transition. So it's the whole concept that an organization may be at one point, and there's another point that they're trying to move to, but there's that liminal area. So our liminal report is looking at organizations as they are transitioning and as they are growing and better addressing issues related towards ethics. So our liminal report is not meant to be a one-time report. It's meant to be a transparency report, and then where there are issues where there is need for improvement, that report then reflects how the companies are addressing those and improving, because a lot of these organizations, they're not able to address these issues necessarily overnight, but they're able to improve and continue to get better. So that's why it's called a liminal report, and that is our transparency report. They're one and the same. So I apologize if I interchanged terminology there. And then global praxis. Praxis is really just an academic term that it means putting theory into practice. So going back to kind of my academic background, you have I was studying, analysis and resolution. Well, the analysis is very much on the theoretical side, looking at something. Why are these causes? Why are we having these effects? What are the causes? What's happening in the situation? What theories can help us better understand the situation? But then you have the resolution side, which is actually resolving it then based upon what your understandings are. So we call this whole service, everything I've just been talking about, we call it our global praxis. It's kind of a fancy term, but essentially it just means it's us globally putting theory into practice. And these are all the theories related towards conflict resolution and related towards trying to find some answers to globalization, which is definitely here before us, and we need to find the answers to the challenges that it comes with.
Joel, on your website, you've got actually an example of one of your reports with one of your clients, and it is Brush Arbor Homes, and describe a program that they've put together. And so I guess I wanted to explore what was Etik's involvement with this? Did you guys actually, assess and then advise, or did you come in and take a look at what they were doing? And could you walk us through this particular customer to the extent, of course, you can? But tell us about your involvement with them and what I see or what someone going to your site would see, and how that relates to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So Brush Arbor Homes and their Buy One, Build One program, that was our first certified partner. Very, very excited about that. And what Brush Arbor does is for every home that they are building another home in a developing nation. And that home is being built for a family that either is without a home or is in a home that is not sufficiently protecting them from the weather or so on and so forth. So it's very much a social entrepreneurship model where there's a home being built here in the United States, and then there's a home as a consequence of the funding for that home. A home is being built for a family in need in a developing nation. So what we did for them is we examined the entire program through our review. We visited the homes and the families in these developing nations, and we ensured that the homes are there, that the program is first and foremost is running exactly as stated. Those who are buying the homes here in the United States can trust that things are as they should be. And then we looked at some of the community impacts. We looked at some potential ethical pitfalls that needed to be kept a close eye on. And then we were able to track the funding so that if someone is expecting a certain amount of money, which was the case for this organization, that they could be ensured that was actually getting there to the family. And we were able to then show that transparently through our liminal report and provide recommendations to the Buy One, Build One program. And then now we're partnering with them as they move forward into the future and as the program expands to new countries. We're looking at continuing right alongside of them and working with them continually in that way. And then certainly, I didn't really touch on this earlier, I should have mentioned this. We want to promote those organizations that are ethical, and so that people can know which organizations they can trust. And so a portion of what we do as well then, and we did this with Brush Arbor Homes, is we wanted to let the community in which they're working in be aware that this organization is certified, this organization is trustworthy. And then, it's one of those things, and this is a big part of what we do. It's not just about trusting us or trusting because we said so. You're able to see the liminal report. You're able to see it yourselves. The consumer who's buying that home can interact with this themselves. They're able to see the report, see what's happening, and really know for themselves. And I think it had a tremendous impact from what we've heard from Brush Arbor Homes. This has had a very positive impact as far as helping promote that trust.
Well, Joel, not to toot y'all's horn too much, but the CSR component of any large multinational organization is obviously very important. And in the space I play in, the FCPA space, it gets a lot of scrutiny because one of the things the Department of Justice will review is your charitable donations, not for the substance of what you're doing, but whether or not there's a possibility of fraud or corruption through that mechanism. But it seems to me with the transparency you're bringing with the analysis or I should say assessment and then certification, that would be something that a company could be very comfortable presenting to a regulator such as Securities and Exchange Commission or the Department of Justice if they're willing to talk about it openly. Would that sound in the ballpark?
Absolutely. I would say that as far as it applies to what is in our liminal report, absolutely. And that would of course be a component of what we do. That it would depend on the organization, what the needs are, but that's definitely a large component. It's that public trust in general, whoever those stakeholders may be, or whether it was a government or an investor that you wanted to show that proof of, if you will, so that they can be assured of that. Absolutely, that would definitely be in the ballpark.
Well, my favorite part of the movie on the waterfront is not any of the classic scenes everyone thinks of. It's near the end when Marlon Brando he's been beaten to a pulp, but he's standing in the sunshine, and he says, "Where I'm standing in the light of day, it looks a whole lot better here." And that's something that's always stuck with me, and so I always try to use that as an example. And your talks about transparency really drive home to me the need to shine that light and to have the light of day on these issues for everyone to see, both here in the United States for regulators, but equally importantly to stakeholders and those needing trust overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
absolutely. Joel, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I was wondering if it would be possible if someone wanted to get in touch with you to follow up on anything you've said. Could you tell us where your website is and any contact information you could give us?
Absolutely. Our website is etik.org, and Etik is spelled E-T-I-K, and so that's etik.org. And you can always email us at info@etik.org. We would love to hear anything that you might want to share with us, any questions you might have, any interests you might have. Certainly any questions are fully welcome, and we'd be happy. We try to be very transparent ourselves. We don't hold ourselves to, we don't hold anyone else to standards we don't keep ourselves. So certainly if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask those. Please feel free to contact us. The email address is a great way to contact us, and then we can go from there or visit our website. We have a contact form there as well, and we have some other information if somebody's having any trouble.
Joel, at the time, it really sounds like not only what you've gotten yourself into is very fascinating, but in my space, it's an absolute adjunct to what I do, and corporations could really use your services. So I look forward to continuing the conversation down the road and seeing what we might can come up with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would completely agree with that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thanks, everybody, for listening.